Up+Adam.
Tractor systems are offline.
We are Beyond FM.
Beyond FM.
The future of broadcasting is here.
Up+Adam with Adam Montiel. It's community content from Concentrate. It's Up+Adam with Adam Montiel.
Some say life is where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Yes, some say life is just where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again.
Welcome back and happy Thursday. Thank you so much for being Up+Adam. My name is Adam Montiel, almost through this week. All right, so what happens when a royal insider and a National Book Award winner write a fictional love letter to Buckingham Palace, but with teeth? Oh, we've got Omid Scobie, the journalist who's been in the royal trenches for over a decade. Also, Robin Benway, the fictional powerhouse behind bestsellers like Far From the Tree. Together, they've co-written Royal Spin, a novel that's sharp, funny, and dangerously close to the truth. And I'll be honest, I don't read a ton of fiction. In fact, I don't read any fiction. But this topic, this conversation, and these two, I was in. So whether you're a royal watcher or not, a fictional devourer or not, or just someone who's just curious about what really goes on behind palace doors, this will hit. This will be a fun chat. I promise you that. So always try to cast a wide net in conversations like this. So please stick around. From White House briefings to Buckingham Palace meltdowns, their book follows a young American politico thrown into the middle of the most traditional institution on earth, and then a scandal she might not be able to get out of or even spin her way out of. The book is already in a development deal with Universal and writer Emily Fox, so they are already on the fast track. So you want to read it before it hits the screen, or at least learn more about the story. You're going to love the chat. We'll talk about the royals, the real-life mess behind the fiction, and why you should never, under any circumstance, bring donuts to Buckingham Palace. That story and more coming up in just a few when we chat with Omid Scobie, also Robin Benway. You're not going to want to miss this. Now, we've been doing little nuggets of Black history, and I have learned so much in really bringing you, well, quick recap. Let me do a reset. Show 1 set the frame. Black history is builders, not just barriers. That's all we always hear, I feel. Show 2, Norbert Ryu. Industry transformed in 1846, almost 20 years before the Civil War, or rather before slaves were free, the end of the Civil War. Show 3, Frederick McKinley Jones, modern refrigeration, World War supply chains. This guy was brilliant. Show 4, most recently, we talked about Thomas L. Jennings, the first Black U.S. patent holder. That was a great story. Used his invention money to help fund abolition. And today we talk about his daughter. Her name, Elizabeth Jennings Graham. The year is 1854. Elizabeth Jennings on her way to church in New York City. She boards a streetcar. The conductor tells her to get off. Black passengers are not allowed. She refuses. Well, they force her off. She doesn't hold a press conference. She doesn't hold or stage a protest. No, she hires a lawyer. And that lawyer, a man named Chester A. Arthur. Yes, that Chester A. Arthur, the future president of the United States. She takes the streetcar company to court, and she wins. The Brooklyn Circuit Court rules that Black passengers, if sober, well-behaved, had the exact same rights as anyone else and could not be removed by force. This is 1854, over 100 years before the Civil Rights Act. Her case led to the desegregation of New York City streetcars. Yeah, let that land. Incredible, huh? When people talk about bus seats and courage, the story usually starts in 1955, but this moment happened a century earlier. Thomas L. Jennings invented dry cleaning. Elizabeth Jennings, his daughter, actually cleaned up the law. Yeah, that's what we mean by dimension. Innovation in one generation, legal victory in the next. Speaking next up, we're going to chat about a 15-year-old girl in Montgomery who refused to move and helped change the country. We'll introduce you to Claudette Colvin in our next nugget here on Up and Adam's Black History. Love this. All right, before we get into our chat with Omid Scobie, also Robin Benway, I want to tell you about our friends at Paso Wine. Just a couple weeks left. This deal is for you if you live in SoCal. Paso Wine coming in hot May 15th through 17th. And right now, locals get that first sip on a deal that is just sweet. $99. Get you into the grand tasting May 16th. Paso Wine Fest happening at the Paso Event Center. $99 a sip with over 100 Paso wineries. You got over 20 different big activations, food, paired with chef this. Oh my God, it's so much fun. We had Krista Smith on the show yesterday talking all about Paso Wine Fest. You want in? You got to buy these deal tickets. These are early birds in person. These are just for locals. So to do that, you got to show your local ID that you live in SLO County. You either do this in person at the Paso Chamber on Spring Street or the SLO Chamber on Monterey. Again, bring that ID. After February 28th, that price jumps, and it jumps. So get in now and sip smart. Also, you can get to AdamMontiel.com. You can win your way in. Again, AdamMontiel.com, right off the homepage, your chance to win your way in to Paso Wine Fest.
It's Up and Adam with Adam Montiel.
All right, today we're welcoming two powerhouses who took the royal world we thought we knew and spun it into something even bolder, far more funny, and way more human. Omid Scobie, the journalist who's covered the British monarchy from the front lines for over a decade. Also, Robin Benway, National Book Award winner, one of fiction's fiercest voices. She's fantastic. She's teamed up for Royal Spin, her and Obi. It's a novel that's as sharp as it is satire. It's a love story. It's a political tangle. Also, behind the curtain look at palace life that feels almost too real. And the reason it does, because he knows all about it, so he's been all up in it. And I'll tell you, even if you don't usually read fiction, this conversation will pull you in. So let's welcome Omid Scobie, Robin Benway. All right, I'm excited to talk to you both. You know, Omid, for years, you've been at the front line of royal reporting. Your byline's been on some of the biggest scoops about the British monarchy, but now you've kind of crossed over into fiction with kind of a satirical twist. What made now the right time to fictionalize the very world you've spent over a decade demystifying?
You know, you say front lines, I say royal trenches. It was 12 years of experiencing every side of being a royal reporter, being in with the royals, on the outs with the royals, favored by the press office, hated by the press office. And I had obviously kept notes and journals throughout that time. And I wanted to bring a lot of my own experiences and things that I'd seen, the weird and the wonderful that goes on behind the scenes, into kind of an alternate royal universe. So much of my time covering the royals, I think, like any journalist with a speciality, you're thinking, like, what if? Like, what if the royals did things this way? What if they actually put out a statement instead of saying no comment, or whatever it is? And so working with Robin, we were able to kind of bring that to life against this really colorful backdrop in the same royal spaces that exist in the present day, but with a completely fictional cast of characters and royals.
No, it's got this, hilarious, clever, a little dangerous, of course, spin, because when someone who knows the royal institution this well starts writing fiction, you're not just imagining things, you're hinting at them. Which character, maybe what's seen in the book, felt closest to something you've actually witnessed, maybe heard behind palace walls, without naming names, of course?
You know, Robin and I definitely wanted to make sure that the royals themselves were not based on any real royals, that no one could read the book and be like, this one's Meghan, this one's Harry, or that one's Prince Andrew, or whatever it may be. I think there is so much going on in terms of headlines with the current Windsor royals that we wanted this to exist in its own space. But I will say that when you read the book and you see how the fires are put out in the royal press office, how crises are managed, and how it works in their favor sometimes and how it doesn't, and obviously with the mix of our fictional protagonist who's moved from the White House press office to take over the Buckingham Palace press office and shakes things up there, you do get to see how the cookie is made. You know, the spaces in which these stories are told, the comms office, are all based on real things. And so, whilst the royals themselves are fictional, when you're reading the book, you're getting to really pull the curtain back and learn how things are in the kind of machine of the British royal institution.
Now, Robin, your protagonist, Lauren, young American thrown into one of the most rigid traditional institutions in the world. And you and Omid, as folks mixed, kind of figuring out, I guess, where the parallels are. How much of Lauren's outsider experience, Robin, was born from maybe you and Omid's experiences in navigating royal reporting as someone who maybe didn't fit the mold?
I think for Lauren, she is in her late 20s. She is working at the White House. She's got this best friend, this boyfriend. And within the first 5 pages of the book, it all has completely fallen apart. And she has to figure out who she is without all of the trappings, the things that she thought that she wanted. So she's really starting out from the bottom, which, as a writer is a fantastic place to put your character. You can see what they're made of. I definitely related to that experience that Lauren went through.
Yeah, I was just moving to LA at the time that Robin and I started working together. So I was kind of experiencing my own culture clashes. But I also think that just as a journalist, when I started on the Royal Bee, I was not far from our protagonist's age, Lauren. And I remember, I had a different journalistic background. I didn't work for a British newspaper. I had only worked for American outlets. And so my approach to the storytelling, my approach to covering the royals was very different to the others. I dressed differently to the others. I would show up to royal engagements in sneakers, because I thought, well, that's comfortable, and so you stand out immediately if that you are not familiar with that space. And that's something that Lauren experiences from her first day, arriving on the job with a big box of donuts, which maybe out here would go down well, but Brits are suspicious of everything. And so when she shows up trying to sweeten them, they all sort of cast a side eye on her. And she kind of experiences that type of thing over and over again.
When we wrote that scene, I kept saying to Omid, are you sure people wouldn't be happy to have donuts? Like, that just seems impossible to me. But, I'm coming at it from such an American perspective, of course.
Right. I love that. The book plays with that enticingly tense relationship between the press and the palace. And, Omid, you lived in that dynamic for years, from probably embargoed scoops to, whisper networks to unofficial, palace resources. What do people still get wrong? I'd love both of you to chime in on this. What do people still get wrong between the media's relationship with the royal family? And how much of Royal Spin is your wink at kind of that messy dance?
Yeah. Lauren has a slight love triangle in the book, and one corner of that triangle is a royal correspondent called Oscar. And what we see between those two is that dance that you refer to of kind of trying to create some kind of personal connection and relationship. And at the same time, you've got one person concerned with the story and the other one concerned with shaping the story. And that was definitely something that I experienced as a reporter. You do get close with the aides. Whilst it may not be romantically, you are close friends. You're having dinner together. You're going out for drinks. You become part of the same world. But at the same time, you have very different interests. And so I think we see that difficulty shown in the book. But I will also say that one of things that the book highlights is how stories actually make it into the press. With me, a lot of people assume that Meghan would pick up the phone and give me a story, or Harry would email me the information. And that was always how it's kind of been presented on the outside world. But actually, those anonymous source quotes, those insider quotes that you see in royal coverage, that's coming from usually a very stressed out, poorly paid press secretary at the Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace press office who's trying to shape the narrative around a story or prevent a bigger story from breaking or whatever it is. That's the relationship that exists there. And that was something that I experienced in many different forms over the years.
I think for me, writing this, the push and the pull between the press and the palace was so fascinating because sometimes they want to keep you close. Sometimes they want to push you away. I think with Lauren and Oscar, the journalist, his motivation isn't quite clear in the beginning, and she doesn't know whether or not that his advances are true, or is he just trying to get a bigger story?
Sometimes satire, guys, tells the truth louder than straight reporting ever could. But, it also risks some backlash. And you've had critics before, especially around finding freedom and your reporting on Meghan and Harry. What's the line, Omid, you walk between being provocative and being protective of the real people behind these fictional mirrors?
I think for any royal correspondent or biographer, especially who's in it for the long term, what the public and the consumer doesn't always think about is that is a journalist or a writer who is thinking about their future relationships. It is great to tell a story, but to tell the full story, you may never be invited back. You may never be on the plane for the next royal tour. You may never have access to the next private press briefing. And so there's always got to be that line between getting the truth out there, but also preserving your own reputation, your own career, your own contacts. And that was why my last book, Endgame, was so important, because I publicly declared that I was going to burn all my bridges to tell the ultimate story. But as a result of that, that means that the door at the palace is closed. Some months after that book came out, I was removed from the royal WhatsApp group. I no longer started receiving the briefings and the information. And you realize that that's kind of the price you pay. So whilst you can take the information you're reading in the press somewhat seriously, you got to remember that's also a journalist trying to protect their job and their future invites to these things.
Two authors, one book, and really a premise that could explode if not handled just right. Co-writing is its own kind of marriage, creative, emotional, probably occasionally messy as well. What surprised you most about working with Robin on this project, and what strengths did each of you bring that made really Royal Spin feel alive, not just clever? And of course, I want Robin's take after.
Writing a novel after years of nonfiction and investigative deep dives and covering the story as a news story, my obsession was always getting double, triple sourcing on things, worrying about whether there'll be legal action or any kind of wrath to face from the palace. And I think one of the most enjoyable parts of writing this book was that I could break away from that fear of the who, what, where, and when of it all. I remember on one of the first writing sessions I had with Robin, she was like, you can make it up if you want, which of course, as a journalist, that's a cardinal sin. So it took some time for me to really feel comfortable stepping outside the confines of reality.
And I think for me, when this project was first brought to my attention, I had written 9 books previously by myself. This would be my first co-authored book. And I just didn't know. My biggest concern was, is this someone that I want to be in the trenches with for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? There's many talented people. There's many successful people. Is this somebody who I actually want to spend time with? Because writing is vulnerable. You're making things up, but you're also throwing ideas at the wall to see what will stick. The first time we met in Los Angeles, and we went for lunch, and Omid, I remember, ordered fries for the table. And I was like, well, that seals the deal for me. Let's wrap this up. Let's go. I can definitely work with this person. But, what impressed me about Omid was he's deeply kind, and he is a deeply empathetic person. And so I feel like that is 2 things that make a fiction book feel real, that make people want to keep going. And he knows how to tell a story, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. So yeah, the whole experience has just been one of the best creative experiences I've ever had in my career.
From coronation absences, Omid, to Christmas invitations declined, the distance between Prince Harry and his family, it still makes headlines. And he doesn't live far from where we're broadcasting from on the Central Coast of California. But more than that, it kind of feels unresolved. For the public, it's a royal soap opera, but for Harry, it's kind of this family fracture, one that truly hasn't healed, especially with Dad sick. Where do things really stand between Harry and his father and his brother right now, beyond the palace optics? And what's the emotional climate behind closed doors that you know of?
Exactly as you say, it is the soap opera that people can't disengage from. The stories keep going on, and ultimately this is the story, despite their very different lives and the privileges that they have and can afford. This is an unconventional family. I think everyone can relate to that. And so it's why I think so many people still feel so invested in the fractures between Harry and his father and the other family members. Of course, we have seen in recent months that Harry's been granted access to sort of the top level security when he visits the country, which was always a concern for him. That means he can now bring his children, his wife on future visits without worrying about any security threats or risks. And that does then open the door to more time as a family in the UK, and potentially with royal family members, particularly King Charles. We've seen those baby steps between Harry and his father in the last couple of years, more phone conversations, more communication between the two sides. And so I can only imagine that over the next year or so, that will continue to grow. And of course, Charles himself is going through a difficult time. He still continues to receive treatment for cancer. And so I would imagine that relationship is top of mind on both sides, given that time is not infinite.
Is there anyone inside there that perhaps has a good relationship, an amiable relationship with Meghan?
I would go as far as to say that there aren't many members of that family that have a great relationship with anyone. I think that this is a space in which, unless you are the heir to the throne, you are always going to feel like there is collateral damage, there is second or third or fourth place, and that creates fractures, that creates politics, that creates tensions. And I think with Meghan, it's something that we see in this book with our protagonist Lauren, who moves from the White House press office to the Buckingham Palace press office, and as an American in a British space, particularly one like the Royal Institution, that is no easy task. And so I think with Meghan, she was kind of damned from the get-go. I remember when she first showed up on the scene, she was Harry's girlfriend, and she had just been introduced after a few months of dating to Harry's staff at Kensington Palace. And a couple of them said to me, they were like, she's nice, but like she reached in for a hug and it kind of felt weird. And of course, like Meghan's thinking, oh, I had such a great time with them and we hugged, and and it just showed the cultural differences that were there. And so I think it was kind of doomed from the get-go when you're bringing someone from a different background into the royal institution. But I also think that there's this like rabid fascination in the press as well. There's a huge part of the tabloid press that is making a lot of money off this story as well. So it's kind of in everyone's interests to keep things the way that they are.
Once again, Meghan brought donuts too early, huh? The headlines,
Relatable.
right? Yeah, the headlines around Prince Andrew, man, they keep resurfacing, especially with the latest Epstein documents, pulling him back into the spotlight. Yet the firm remains mostly silent. The strategy seemingly to outweigh the outrage. What's the monarchy's real end game with Andrew? Has he been permanently exiled, or is the institution quietly, shielding him in hopes the public forgets?
Yeah, Adam, I think that was the approach from the Royal Institution for a long time, which was just to ignore it, to hope that it will go away, that if Andrew disappears from the spotlight, people will stop asking questions. And as we've seen, particularly with the kind of like periodic releases from the Epstein files, more and more information comes to light. And so more and more questions then are raised by the British public and the British government, who want to know how things got so bad and how things were so ignored for so long. And so there's real pressure now on members of the British royal family to address this, to speak about the Epstein victims, to speak about why things got so bad and why Andrew was allowed to get away with so much for such a long time. And I think that's something that we see in the book is like, we have Lauren that comes into the Buckingham Palace press office who says, the public want transparency from institutions like this today. You can no longer sweep it under the rug or bury your head under the sand around, or as the royals say, never complain, never explain. That just doesn't fly. And so I think that plays a huge role, that change in mentality for the preservation of the future of the royal family. Otherwise, people will still continue to lose faith and trust, and it will be downhill moving forwards.
I want to take a look inside for the next couple minutes, kind of ripping the curtain back. I spoke several months ago at a writers' conference, and I think people, especially writing fiction, especially writing it with someone, would love kind of an inside look. How does the relationship move when we're creating characters, when we're, maybe Omid at times, you're kind of, what, I'm really feeling passionate about where I'm kind of taking this. I need Robin to step back for a second. Or maybe like I'm really leaning on Robin to kind of fill in these voids that I just can't seem, T's I can't cross, I's I can't dot. And Robin, in the same way, like how does one kind of go, hey, this is where I need to lean on him, but I also know I need to really assert myself here. And then how do you guys both check yourselves with that?
I do feel like we're sort of the wrong people to ask, because it really did feel so easy. Again, this was, my first time working with someone, and this is Omid's first time writing fiction. So I wasn't sure what to expect, but I think what helped us, we were always in service of the book. It wasn't about his ego, my ego, our successes, privately or personally. It was more about what is the best path for these characters and what is this best path for the book. And I think by keeping that at the forefront, it was very easy to work together. I also feel like if one of us did feel very passionately about either adding something to the book or taking something out, that came up rarely enough where we both knew, okay, that's fine. We can do that. Like, we can absolutely make this happen. If you feel so strongly about this, we can make that work. But we just had a lot of respect for each other and each other's talents. And I think that went a really long way as well.
If anything didn't work, we often put it aside or on a list of things for kind of like future entries into this story. And so actually, by the time we got to the end of the book, we felt like we had enough material basically for the sequel to this from the pretty much instantly. And so as these characters' lives evolved, more of their backstories evolved, and more of their kind of like the future projections for where their story goes next came about. And so when you're working with someone, you actually have this kind of like 24/7 sounding board, which as a writer, you're often so isolated. You don't always have someone to quickly say like, what do you think about this? And so you might spend 5 days writing it, then looking at it, then hating it. You can save a lot of time by just asking your co-author, what do you think about it, and keep it moving.
I think it helped too that we were in the same city, that we could meet in person, talk in person, and, flesh this book out page by page together.
I love it. Omid, your first scoop into fiction, Robin, your first co-authoring. I think that made for the perfect recipe, and really a chemistry with the both of you that you can't deny. Both of your voices are fantastic. You guys need to do a podcast together. I could listen to you guys read the phone book. I love this.
Oh, wonderful. Side hustle.
Thank you so much, both of you, for the time, for the book, and for being Up and Adam. I can't thank you both enough.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank
Lovely
you
to be with you.
Some say life is where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again.
Big thanks to Omid and Robin, not just for Royal Spin, but for such a genuine, smart, really, really fun conversation. Both their voices too, huh? They just were so dialed in. I love both of their presentation. Their delivery was incredible. It's available wherever you buy your books. Hit the link in the show notes to make it easy. Also, you can follow Omid on Insta at Scobie Naps. Also, Robin at Robin Benway. I got links there, so you don't even have to listen to me and type it in. Just go hit the links in the show notes and you are good. All right. Coming up Friday, I'm excited. We'll talk to Robin Coleman from the Woods Humane Society tomorrow. Lots going on. Excited. Full week of some great shows this week. Thank you so much for being here, connecting. Also, anytime you can share what we're doing with a friend. A couple little things of note. I love the event Rosé the Slow Way. It's kind of a great precursor to what we do with Pink Drink in July. Rosé the Slow Way is Hotel Slow. It's going to be incredible. Absolutely incredible. So you can get your tickets. They just went on sale. And let me check the date of this because I want to say it's in April 19th. April 19th, we will gather at Hotel Slow. I'm happy to be back as MC. It's a fun event. The food, the way they dial in the food with these two events, of course, they got this one, and then in the fall, they got autumn's foray. But man, oh man, this is so much fun. So get to it. We got, we'll put links in the show notes so you can get your tickets to Rose the Slow Way. Actually, just check them out on Instagram. Super easy. All right. And then when you're over there, let them know you heard them on Up and Adam. Love our friends over there at Hotel Slow, whether it's Ox and Anchor, Peter Dina, that whole vibe. Really second to none. Okay, let's thank our friends Moonshiner Collective for being Up and Adam. Original music on this show, it's called Start Again. Stream them wherever you get your music. Also, moonshinercollective.com. They got an album release late March, Slow Brew. So check that out. That's going to be a fun concert. No doubt. Don't want to miss that. moonshinercollective.com for your tickets and more. We got to bring those guys on in the next few weeks. We definitely will. Also, our thanks to Josh and Chiasa Clapper, Tamber Winery. These guys, their wine, oh man, so good. World-class wine. Taste it in the village of Arroyo Grande. You can walk right in. Appointments also good. Go to Tamber, Timbre. Yes, that's how you say it. TamberWinery.com. Finally, again, thank you for connecting here, sharing this with a friend, and being here every day. Any day, honestly. It means so much to me. We're changing the game of broadcasting, bringing a broadcast radio quality show to a podcast every day, starting locally right here in SoCal. So thank you so much. All right. Coming up tomorrow, again, Friday, Robin Coleman, a lot more. Till then, enjoy the day. Cool temps, sunny though. Nice, enjoy this. You only got a few days of it before about a week of rain. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, let's enjoy the sunshine together. Till tomorrow, I'm Adam Montiel. Thank you for being Up and Adam.
Some say life is where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again. Let's start again.